Welcome to the Get Real About Safety podcast. In our podcast, we discuss the new view of safety, what works and what doesn't work, to break down old paradigms and help you improve safety performance in your organization. Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Pam, and we appreciate you listening. Please share and subscribe and tell others about this podcast. You can find us on most podcast platforms and also on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Get Real About Safety. Today we have a very special guest. David Lynn is president of Peak Safety Performance based in Greenville, South Carolina. They're a consulting and training firm specializing in safety performance improvement, leadership development, and human performance improvement. David has published numerous articles in some of the top safety magazines and has authored 2 books on safety leadership and is a frequent speaker at various conferences around the country. I think you will really enjoy our podcast today. Hi, David.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
Not too bad. We're trying to just get through the summer.
You know, we just had our air conditioning go out in our house, and it went out Sunday, and we had to put a new thermostat in, and then it went out again Monday, and another new thermostat, and Tuesday, and another new thermostat. Till they finally figured out it's not the thermostat, it's actually a circuit board in the side of the unit outside.
Well, that makes you realize how much you appreciate AC in the summer in the South. Isn't that the truth?
I'm telling you, last night was the first night we've had some cool air, and I slept like a baby.
I know what that's like. It makes you remember back to when you were young. My grandmother didn't have air conditioning. She just had a box fan in the window. And so you had to get beside the window and fight for that position on the couch.
I'm telling you.
Remember.
I'm telling you. I don't see how people took it back in the old days.
No, that's the truth.
Well, let's go ahead and get into our podcast here. And so if you don't mind, I've been knowing you for several years. And I think I actually met you a number of years back when you worked for Fluor.
Right.
And so we've had an affiliation for quite a while, and we've done some stuff together. And so if you don't mind, just start out talking about your journey from when you got into safety to where you are today.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. I've been listening to you and Pam recently, and I really enjoy your hands-on side of how you apply human performance. Well, and like you said, I think we got to know each other at Fluor probably in the, 2006-07 time frame. I always had heard of Mike and Pam, and so I got to meet you when you came and did some things for us there. But my career in safety started back in 1992 when I worked for OSHA for about 3 years. And so I cut my teeth on safety in a regulatory environment. But after a few years, I realized that I wanted to expand my experience and got an opportunity to work for Duracell in Lancaster, South Carolina, where we made AA and AAA batteries. It was a 7-day operation, 24/7, and it was an extremely fast-paced environment to work. And so my learning curve from the OSHA days into manufacturing was pretty steep. It was very valuable. And then after that, I got a taste of construction when I got to go work for Owens Corning near Lancaster and build a cultured stone facility. And so I got to experience construction from the very beginning and start up a plant and then operate a plant as an EHS manager there for a while. And then, around 2004, I got a job working with Fluor in their corporate office in Greenville, South Carolina. So that was a little bit closer to home and a great opportunity to work for a really good company. And so I spent about 8 years working for Fluor, supporting projects all over the world, from oil and gas to a little bit of Department of Energy to power, just roads and bridges, a little bit of everything. Then the travel was a little tough. And so after a while, I decided to jump into the consulting game where I could control my schedule a little bit better. And so that's when I started doing what we do now. Mm-hmm. And been consulting now for about, since 2012, really, I believe. No, I'm sorry. around 2012. Like it. I like building the business.
That's awesome. What type of companies do you work with?
It's a blend. We are about half and half of construction and manufacturing. So we're in and out of some automotive industries, but also have worked with Fluor again, as a contractor, and we do a little bit of everything. So a lot in the Greenville area, there is a lot of automotive type companies in this area, so we get involved with that. But we've also hit the construction jobs from the big boys like Fluor down to people that just need your basic OSHA stuff.
So, David, what got you interested in more advanced levels of safety, or should I say high performance safety culture type work?
That's a great question. I think my overall background was always regulatory, but I realized really fast when I got to Duracell and Owens Corning that a regulatory base is valuable, but you can be 100% in compliance and still have injuries. And so I started gravitating towards programs that were a little bit more advanced to help improve safety. So I've migrated through different phases, real strong on the management system side. I've been involved with OSHA's VPP through the years. I've been involved with different management system stuff like that. But I think probably my exposure to high performance cultures really came at Fluor, where the demand was really strong and the performance had to be at a high level or you didn't do work in certain environments. And so I think culture became a big part of my focus at that time, and understanding the different frameworks that build those safe cultures. And so I think that was huge. And then I think I got exposure to HP, human performance, at Fluor working on DOE sites in Washington originally, and then I spent 6 months down at Savannah River and worked with some of the smartest people I've ever been around that really built and lived the HP type environment. And so I think that's sort of an elevator speech for my exposure to high performance cultures. But I've just gained more and more interest over the years in how to help people not make mistakes.
It's interesting that you should mention Hanford. Pam actually used to work there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I thought so.
She's from Washington State, and she worked at the Hanford nuclear facility for a number of years before going into commercial construction. And it's kind of funny because I was in the nuclear construction site at Vogel right across the river from Savannah River plant for years.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting that you've got that common thread there.
Oh yeah, and the beauty about working for Fluor is I got to work in all types of environments. From the DOE side, the government side, to the power side, to the oil and gas side, and just to see the different cultures, safety-wise, and all those different environments was huge. And I always felt like learning in each one of those environments was instrumental in how I've kind of formed my thought processes around safety and leadership.
Wow. Talk about quick learning. When you're immersed in that level and having to learn that quickly, that's really, that's great.
Yeah, I've been blessed, no doubt. I've had a lot of great mentors and tried to absorb everywhere I went.
That kind of brings up a little question I have just of interest, working with other cultures around the world. Mm-hmm. What do you find in terms of different views about management, different views about work with different cultures you've worked with? And I'm talking about social cultures rather than organizational cultures, but how they interact.
That's a great question. I think it's kind of a dangerous question because, and what I mean by that is every country is different. And so I've been to projects on the Sakhalin Island in Russia, to the Middle East, to Canada, the U.S. and Mexico, and all over. And I think what I found is that you think of countries that would not be as evolved maturity-wise would be some of your unsafest environments. And in some ways they may start out that way. But what I found too is that a lot of times those environments are willing to listen and do the things you ask of them and really try to do things right. And you compare that to the United States and some other countries similar to the U.S. where we're a little more hard-headed. It's funny how we may think we're more evolved, and we are in some ways, but the reality is it's hard to tell somebody in the U.S. to do something if they don't want to do it. And so when you balance those out, you may end up in a culture that's a less mature safety-wise starting, but yet they're more willing to be coached and do things that you're trying to do. So you got to find the right common ground wherever you go and lead from that position of common ground.
That is really interesting. And I guess sort of that brings another thing to mind. Do you find that different cultures view their people differently in terms of the value of their people?
I think so. I think all people, they have a value for life. I think, but in different cultures, I think they circle in their own cultures different. Like, for example, a project in the Middle East, you may have 10 or 12 different nationalities on one project, speaking different languages, eating different foods, and just having their own, I guess, circle of the way they see life. But you can still get work done even with those different cultures. And I think you learn to navigate how to do that.
That is really interesting. So today, what type of services do you offer your clients?
Well, we have three main business focus. One is that we do training, and we do leadership training, and we also have trainers that do basic OSHA stuff. I focus most of my attention and my classes on the leadership side, from root cause analysis to HP to risk assessments, things like that. I enjoy that. And then we've got great instructors that do your typical OSHA 10s and fall protection, confined space. So that training development is one element. Then we have a focus on different performance assessments and performance improvement, where we go in and help do different types of leadership skill type assessments and take some of the things I've written in my books and apply those. And so that has a wide range of requests. It's basically what the clients are looking, whatever they need, we go in and fill the gaps. And then really that third element is we provide some site services work and can put safety people on jobs to help support short-term work or long-term work. And so the good thing about my background is I've met a lot of people. When a company has a need, I might know somebody. And so I love putting that puzzle together, and sometimes it works and helps everybody.
It's interesting you do that. We actually dabbled in that when we first started. We've been in business now for 21 years. Mm-hmm. And when we first started, we kind of threw out a big net trying to capture a lot of stuff in the market, right? And so we got into the staffing thing briefly, but we kind of found out just for us, it just wasn't something we really, every now and then you get somebody that you would have to replace. I'm just not one of these people who likes to get rid of people. So it just turned out to be something that was not good for us, but I know other people like yourself that have been pretty doggone successful with that.
Well, the way it's worked for me is that I don't promote it, and it's not a part of my business I really push. But what will typically happen is I can get a call on a Friday night and say, "Hey, David, I need somebody on this project." And I'll ask, "Well, when do you need them?" "Well, I need them Monday or Tuesday." And then you're like, all of a sudden that becomes a challenge for me. And it's like, I don't know, my adrenaline gets running, and I start thinking, well, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And so I start making phone calls, and occasionally I can make it work. And so when I can fill that gap like that on a dime, I feel like I'm providing a valuable service. I'll give you a good example is a few months ago, right in the middle of the COVID stuff, a tornado went through our area, EF3 tornado, and just wiped out houses and businesses. And one of my main clients was a company that made in the automotive industry, took out their plant. And so they, the Fords of the world merged onto that company and said, we want it back up and running within a month. And so I had a lot of contractors that are clients that were helping with that. And so one of them called and said, hey, you got somebody that can support this safety wise for us? And so within a day, I had somebody there helping them. And so they've been working unbelievable hours over the last few months just to get this plant up and running so that people can work, but also that they can provide their product to the big companies that they deal with. And so being able to help like that is really what I enjoy about staffing. It's not really about the money side of that. It's really about, I like helping people that need a job, and I like clients that need people to do it. And so that works out great.
Speaking of COVID, I know we certainly were affected. We went for a couple of months with almost nothing going until we've converted a lot of things to virtual type training and consulting. And how about you guys? Have you experienced any bumps with this whole COVID thing?
A lot of bumps. So March and April, we were similar. We had, our schedule was 100% full virtually. And so we had things scheduled in Colorado and Montana and Canada and in the Southeast. And then all of a sudden they started dropping one after the other. And so the good thing, not good thing, but as things dropped off the list, other things picked up, like helping the plant get started again. And then other clients that had projects going that needed help with the pandemic response. And so I've been blessed in the sense where things have dropped off, other things picked up, and we've been able to adjust. I teach classes for Greenville Tech in our area. And so they went to online classes just similar to this. And so we were able to do some of those classes online. And, I think being mobile, being flexible, and just being able to adapt is what we've tried to do.
That's what you got to do to survive this day and time.
Absolutely.
So if we get back to the services you provide, leadership, the performance improvement stuff, human performance, what kind of results do your clients tend to achieve?
Well, it depends on how much they jump in. I think, and really that's the key. What I've learned through the years is it's not always the program you give people, it's the ownership and enthusiasm they develop or dedicate to it. And so I think when the clients I've had that have really embraced the idea that management engagement is one of the key factors that really make a program work, they've seen pretty consistent levels of improvement. And so I think that's the key. It's the companies that kind of take the information as information and don't really jump both feet in. It's just another part of their library that they have in their history. But the ones that do the best are the ones that say, hey, I believe in this engagement stuff and I get involved. Or, for example, I've got some clients that have taken some of my principle to practice classes and have begun to systematically add some of those practices into their framework. And I think they see how that helps their culture build over time. So we've seen a wide range of success, but it all goes back to the idea of what people are willing to get excited about and behind. And when that happens, you'd be amazed. It just, that's where things take off.
Man, you hit the nail on the head. And that is really the same experience that we have. We do a lot of culture assessment work and a lot of change management work, and of course the human performance stuff. And it really is that. It's how much management embraces it. I mean, for example, we'll do these culture assessments and get a baseline measurement, make some recommendations, and help them to strategically plan for improving their culture. But then sometimes management just kind of throws the report in the drawer. They don't really act on it, or they kind of partially act on it. And so it truly is the level of excitement.
I agree. I listened to one of your podcasts on transformation, safety and you were talking about John Cotter and his book and 8 Steps of Leading Change. I love that book, and you see it so often in business with safety is that you can't get past those first 2 or 3 steps to improve because people don't get the coalition together, the team together. They don't have the right vision and focus, and they don't communicate it relentlessly. They see the information as good stuff, but they drop the ball in probably steps 3 or 4 of that lead and change mindset.
And that really is it. We find that a lot of organizations are just not familiar with steps that they need to take to manage that change.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they do, sometimes they just avoid doing the hard stuff. In other words, we do these culture reports, and a lot of things come out, a lot of low-hanging fruit. But it's the major things that change the culture. And they tend to avoid doing the big stuff that really makes a difference, and just kind of go out and fixing little low-hanging fruit things. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. People want a checklist that they can go mark off what they did and say it's done, but they don't always understand the value, and what you apply is really in the system that has long-term sustainability. And so I think that's the key in our leadership workshops, is I try to impart the idea to people that you have to have a system to be able to improve things. And it's not just about going out and correcting things on a list. So you've got to have a system that pre-plans, a system that identifies, a system that continuously learns. And those in and of themselves set the framework and structure that gives you long-term improvement. And I think sometimes that's a little bit harder, like you mentioned, takes a little bit more focus. And again, it's not a checklist item you mark off, but you've got to look at it as a sustainable way to approach things.
You really do. And folks have to be willing to kind of do the hard work.
Right. I agree.
So, you're highly involved in leadership development. How important is leadership to developing a culture of safety excellence?
That's everything, because you can only rise to the level of your leadership. And so people respond to the expectations you have as a leader. They respond to the questions you have as a leader. And I kind of look at it like this on the human performance side, is that people filter their decisions through a handful of things. So if you have an organization with leaders that care, and that framework of the organization really expresses that caring nature, people adjust their decisions based on that framework. If you have supervisors, frontline people that engage the workforce, people adjust their decisions based on the way supervisors engage with them. And then I think that third level is the employee. So once you have that system that engages, and the employees, the supervisors that are interactive, employees are more willing to make good, solid, tactical decisions at the workplace. And so to me, leadership drives all of that. It's the common thread through all of it. And so you've got to have the right vision, you have the expectations and urgency behind all that, but really a mindset too that says we're going to continuously get better. And I think that flows down through an organization.
It really does. And, it kind of begs another question. What is your experience? Our experience is that not a lot of companies traditionally have done leadership development.
Right.
And so it's now starting, here in the recent years, it's getting a little more popular. But what's been your experience? Well, I guess kind of like, what percentage of companies do you feel like actually do something to develop leadership?
I would say my experience when I jumped in the consulting world, coming from Fluor, leadership development, you had standard safety supervisor training that everybody had to go through. And so in my mind, it was a staple. And so, but when you get into consulting and you tell people about these things, they look at you like, what are you talking about? And when they think of leadership development in safety, the first thing that comes to their mind is OSHA 10, OSHA 30. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's definitely valuable. I come from that regulatory environment. I can't discard that, can't deny that, but none of that matters if people don't go lead and act afterwards. And so my experience has been is that the bell curve is really around the top of the bell curve. People exist in that regulatory space, but really that top 20% are the ones that focus on leadership. And so it's a smaller market base in terms of what we do, but to me, it's the most valuable part.
do you find that in the training and the development piece of it, that once leaders or once managers get involved, that they pick up interest?
A little bit, yeah, I think so. Especially if you can give them ideas that make them think about how to communicate, how to plan out their jobs, and help them understand that leadership drives efficiency with safety. You know, safety is not an add-on. It's not something you bolt on to the process. It is a true measure of efficiency. And if you can get that into people's minds, then they understand that if I plan out this job right, then things go better. You know, you're able to manage the job better. You're able to get things on schedule. But guess what? When you plan it out right, you have things that are safer. So it's a total integration of how people do work. And so sometimes if you can help a manager realize it's not about adding something onto their job, it's about being able to do it more effectively. Because safety, I forget which person I heard say this, but it's so true, is that safety is really, again, not an activity. It's just the way you get from point A to point B without getting hurt. And to me, leadership really is the common thread that makes that happen.
And I think that's pretty profound. You know, oftentimes folks don't see that. They see that if they're going to have to be a safety leader, you're adding something to them.
Right.
They've got more forms, more paperwork, more tasks, and
Right.
we got to do more work for less money. And I think what you're saying about showing them that it's about being more efficient is key.
It is. It is. It's an attention to the details that are hard to describe to people that have not been around it. And so the beauty of working for Floors, I got to go into the good, the bad, and ugly. So I saw good clients, great clients, and what separated the good and the great. And one of the things it did was their mentality around doing things, you know, the right way. There was a very straight line and very clear delineation between what should be done and not. And I think trying to take that average group and help them understand that is part of the fun and the challenge, but it's really the next level. And if you want to get to that level, you've got to understand that it takes leadership to do that.
Yeah, and you know that's another profound thing you just said. You know, when there's a way that things are done in an organization, you know, that truly defines the culture of the organization.
Right. No, I agree. What's been your experience? Some of the same?
Almost identical.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's pretty universal with most companies. The other thing is kind of funny that we hear from some of the less sophisticated companies, especially some of the supervisor types, is I'm already a leader. I'm a supervisor, or I'm a manager. And so
there's
sometimes
a difference between managing and leading, right?
there's a huge difference. And,
Yeah.
and the other part of that is that sometimes people see that leadership is a title or a position.
Right. I've got sort of an off-the-wall example that always stands out to me. I grew up in a sports environment, played a lot of sports, and my kids did too. And I just remember growing up, the coaches that I liked the best were not just the ones that yelled at me the most. I had plenty of those, but it was the ones that would yell at me and show me specifically what I was doing wrong and specifically what I needed to do right.
Yeah.
And they weren't just yelling at me for doing wrong. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but to me, a good leader is able to look at their workforce and help coach people and not just pitch a fit because things are right or wrong, but to jump in there and actually help define the tools and techniques to do it right. And so that's the leadership side that I try to add to our classes. It's sort of a tactical nature a leader has to have to coach on any level.
So, and you know, that is truly a leader should be a coach, and that's the main job of a leader is to coach their people. We've got a client right now that pretty much have converted all of their performance appraisals. They've positioned all of their managers and supervisors as coaches, and then they measure them on coaching effectiveness.
Right.
And I mean, it's just demanded in that organization. It's
that sounds like a great thing. Definitely a great thing.
Let's talk a little bit about human performance. You know, that is the next generation in safety and operational excellence. And so what kind of got you interested in that whole arena? You talked about it a little bit a while ago, but kind of talk about your evolution into that and kind of what you guys do today.
It's been sort of a stop and go kind of evolution of my interest. And so if you go back in time, I think working at and interacting with Hanford and Savannah River, I always got exposure to human performance in those arenas. And I think one of the best classes I had was years ago. I had a Shane Bush class that was, I can't remember if it was at Savannah River or Hanford, but one of the two. And so I really liked the material. But the problem I had at the time was that it felt so academic. Mm-hmm. And it had such a intellectual component that was so academic that sometimes I had a hard time bridging the gap between, hardcore construction and that academic sort of nature of it. I don't know if that makes sense. But through the years, I've been able to sort of understand that the academic side is there's a hands-on side that makes sense that you can communicate. And so through the years, I've been trying to be able to put it in a language people can understand and learn from the academic side, but speak in a way that it applies to everyday people. Does that make sense?
I'm going to tell you, David, you and I are on the same sheet of music about that.
Yeah, and that's why I like you and Pam. You and Pam have a very hands-on, practical side that I respect.
One of the things that just really bugs me about some of the human performance books and some of the talks you hear, and there's some great people out there, and I mean great researchers that are just wonderful, but some of it is so academic, it is so difficult for the average person to understand that if you don't just put it in plain, simple, practical language as to what does this look like every day out in the work world, you just kind of lose people. For example, I was reading a book recently. I won't give the name of the author, but it was one of those books. It was a really good book, but you read a paragraph, and you got to sit there 20 minutes thinking, what did he just say?
Right. No, I get it. No, and I learn from those books. But if I take that to my clients, they look at me like, huh, what are you talking about? And so that has always been the biggest barrier for me with HP is it doesn't sound practical until you really understand the what they're trying to say. And so I think that's the key. And so over the last couple of years, I've been trying to, my biggest client base has been more regulatory minded. But I'm trying to shift them into a human performance mind without the academic intellectual component. Well, it sounds bad. I don't really mean it in terms of, I don't know. I'm just trying to it's like just talking the same language.
I mean, you really have to. And the more that you can just make it practical to the work itself and use plain language. And, it takes a lot of work to do that. You have to read it. You have to absorb it. You have to translate it.
Even the name human performance improvement or human operational performance, it sounds so mechanical and impersonal, but it is just the direct opposite of that. And so I think it's a barrier. I'll give you a good example. To me, like if you take skill mode, performance mode type mentality, and you talk about it like you're reading it out of the book from the studies, people look at you like, what are you talking about? But then if you describe it to them in the terms of, like a new driver getting their license at 15 versus myself at, been driving for 30 years, and you explain how both make mistakes, but yet they come from a different angle of mistakes, then people can make the connection that, you're talking about, my forklift driver that's fresh in the seat behind the wheel, he's going to make different mistakes than my experienced guy that still has that same capacity. And so when we don't throw around those big HP terms as much, but yet we talk about it on a real world sense, it makes a bigger difference to me.
I'll tell you kind of a funny thing. We had a client a while back who it was a corporate safety director, went to his CEO and gave him some articles on human performance, and they were pretty academic. He read about 3 paragraphs and threw it in the garbage can.
I believe it.
And so he finally asked me to come up and talk to the CEO. And the first question I asked was, how much do you think human error cost you? And take safety completely out of the picture in other areas like quality, production, customer service, accounting, those areas. And his response at that point was millions. And so then we started talking practically about error, and we got his attention. But that academic stuff just doesn't get it.
Right. But you know what is the simplest part of that academic stuff that just, it's like a light bulb going off in my head. It sounds silly, but the idea that people make mistakes.
Yep.
When you just say that and you sit there and think, well, of course they make mistakes. But then you sit back and think, how do we respond to those mistakes? Managers, myself included, over my whole career, when you hear about those mistakes people made, you sit back and think, what the heck were they thinking? Or why did you do that? And you know better. But yet we act like nobody ever makes a mistake. And so to me, the most simple, fundamental part of HP is not academic. It's the reality that we're all fallible and that we are going to make mistakes. We need to minimize that, but we also need to insulate ourselves from it. And we do that with good decisions filtered through the right things. And that represents the layers that of the anatomy and event, so you don't have to talk in engineering, scientific, academic terms to understand that, hey, we screw up and we got to figure out how to help ourselves.
It reminds me of something that Todd Conklin talked about a while back, that we tend to want people to be more like machines, and we want machines to be more like people. And you see that a lot. I don't know why that is in the workplace. We tend to just discount the fact that human beings are human beings and they make errors.
Absolutely. I agree. We're on the same page with that.
Yeah. So what are you seeing in terms of clients? How are they taking to this whole HP thing?
I think they like it when, especially if I've just finished up a series with a client, a regional client, that I didn't call it HP. I called it Safety Leadership Training. Mm-hmm. Everything about the class was a human performance exercise. And so I think when I call it something different, people warm up to it. Honestly, I don't know why that is, but if I talk about how to help your supervisors manage their work better, people will love it. But I think but if I say, hey, I'm going to do a human performance class, they don't connect with what I'm providing. So I think we're beginning to be able to use our approach a little bit different, and they like the material. They like sort of the hands-on side that we put to it, and the reality of it is that it's all about engagement and being able to help people see the work being done by the people that do the work. And I think it makes sense to them. And so we're having success.
And I think that's a good approach, David. We've done some of that as well, as just roll human performance into safety leadership training and just don't even use the term.
Right.
Your more sophisticated clients, though, or people that have maybe an owner demanding that they implement the principles. Certainly, it's okay, but your clients that are not familiar, it's a good approach.
Well, I found the same thing, and I am curious. I know you and Pam kind of started on the Georgia Tech regulatory side through the years, and that's kind of how we got to know you. How did you transition over into HP? And I'm not trying to switch the interview on you, but I'm curious how that worked. Yeah.
So, we spent a number of years, and we actually Pam and Philip are still very involved in that regulatory side over there. So we were involved for a long time on that. And we started doing years ago, we started doing a course called Construction Safety Management. Mm-hmm. And it became very popular. And, it was really based around culture change and leadership more than anything else, and how to shape behavior. And so that got so popular. We got so much request to expand that to other industries. So we changed the name to Advanced Safety Management.
And of course, what you do at Georgia Tech now, isn't it?
We do that course at Georgia Tech. And of course, it's changed a lot over the years. We're continuous improvement, right? We're constantly improving that course. And so as we moved along, and I started reading more about human performance, and I'll tell you probably the biggest spark was I actually heard Dr. Todd Conklin speak at a Southern Company conference. I was actually speaking there myself, and I heard Todd speak, and it's when he first came out with his book, Pre-Accident Investigations, and it set me on fire. And I'm thinking, this is the best thing I have ever heard in my entire career.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That's
because,
great.
you know, it's one of those things that in the back of your head, you always kind of knew that this is the way things really should be.
I totally agree.
But to hear Todd talk about it and then to read his book, it just set me off on the path to this is the direction we're going. And so we've tried to refine that over the years. And I can't really even express how grateful I am for the opportunity just to hear him speak that time.
Oh, yeah. He's one of my, I like listening and reading his stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's got a good podcast too.
He does. He really does. So what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to companies that want to improve safety performance? If you were to give one or two pieces of advice, what would they be?
I think I would start with the idea that people, that decisions they make to do work every day is not linear. It's sort of an up and down process throughout the course of the day. And they have to adjust and make decisions. And so if we're going to adjust to help them, we have to understand our safety framework has to be in place. And so that's one of my books that I wrote, Principle to Practice, that we talk about following the blue line, which means that kind of like a GPS, you have a starting point and a destination, and there's different routes to get there. But in safety, we have to have the right milestones to get there. And that framework that we develop through Principle to Practice represents a higher level of influence on decisions. But I think the biggest tactical thing I would say to people is that you really can't get better unless your frontline leaders and managers are highly visible on a consistent basis, and they actually talk to employees to learn. Talk to them to understand and not to dictate and order them around. I think if they can understand that, that is a catalyst to get better.
You know, that is huge. And that's one of the things that we recommend a lot in our culture assessment work is field presence. Having managers and supervisors out there interacting with people, finding out where their difficulties are, asking what they need, not just telling them what to do. And it's amazing when they do get out there and they make that interaction. I had a guy one time, I think it was in Washington State, who made the statement. He said, you know, I have noticed that the more engaged that I am, the more engaged my employees are. He said,
Isn't that funny?
He said, but if I back off, they back off.
Right. Lesson learned right there. I think that's a good way to look at it. I think managers look at employees as the problem a lot of times, and it's really the reverse. And I mean, is that employees solve problems all day, every day. And so part of our goal was to be able to see how they're solving them and how to help them, how to break down obstacles, give them decision-making thought processes that help and support it. And I think because nobody wants to get hurt. And so I think if we establish the structure and the expectation and the support, it's amazing how the program will get better. You don't need 2,000 pages of a safety manual to help you. What you need is active engagement one-on-one with people to see what the problems are.
Absolutely. Talk about your books a little bit. I know you wrote a book called Principles to Practice.
Right.
And I think you co-authored a book as well. So talk a little bit about your books and where people can get those.
Yeah, I about 2006 or 7, I co-authored a book with David Sarkis, 22 Ways to Make You a Champion for Safety. And then that was sort of my learning tool to the book writing stuff. And then a few years later, I authored my first Principle to Practice book that was based on the idea that there are certain principles that we all believe and feel strongly about, but if we don't have certain tools and techniques and practices to put them in place, they don't mean much. And so I sort of built a book around that. And then recently in the last year, I did a volume 2 of that and called that Principle to Practice, Follow the Blue Line, which is really my favorite book that I've written so far. And they're available on Amazon, at Amazon.com, or you can go to our website, my website, peaksafetyperformance.com. And so they're available there.
Is that how people can get in touch with you as well, or is there
Yeah.
other contact information?
Yep, they can get in touch with me at david.lynn@peaksafetyperformance.com, or they can go to my website and they can find me there.
That's excellent. Well, we're about up on time. Is there anything else that you you feel like adding, or anything that you're just burning up to say?
No, I think we covered a lot of bases. I've definitely enjoyed and appreciated the opportunity to talk with you, Mike. I've always thought a lot of you and Pam, and have enjoyed working with you in the past. And so thank you for letting me be a part of your podcast.
Well, thank you, David. I think you bring a lot of value, and I've always appreciated our professional affiliation over the years. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. We'll talk later.
All right.